For decades, you've probably been told the same thing. Nuts are healthy. A perfect snack. Good for the heart, good for the brain. And in general, that sounds reasonable. But here's what almost no one explains clearly after the age of 60. Your body no longer reacts to foods the same way it did at 40 or even 50. The liver processes fats more slowly. The kidneys filter minerals less efficiently. Inflammation rises more easily. And small dietary choices can have much bigger consequences. That's why some nuts that seem harmless, even healthy, can quietly work against you later in life. Recent research and long-term dietary observations show something uncomfortable. Certain nuts, when eaten regularly after 60, are associated with increased inflammation, higher strain on the liver, mineral imbalances, and in some cases, greater cardiovascular and cognitive risk. At the same time, other nuts do the opposite. They support memory, they stabilize blood sugar, they protect blood vessels, and they help the aging brain stay resilient. Today, we're going to look at both sides. First, the 4 nuts many adults over 60 are better off limiting or avoiding. Then, the 4 nuts that consistently show benefits when eaten correctly. This isn't about fear, and it's not about banning foods forever. It's about understanding how aging physiology changes the rules. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you something simple. Which nuts do you eat most often right now? And have you ever noticed feeling more joint stiffness, fatigue, or brain fog afterward? Share that in the comments. We read them carefully. Now let's start with number 4 on the list to limit, because it's one many people never suspect. Macadamia nuts are often marketed as a luxury health food. They taste smooth, they're creamy, and they're usually labeled as heart-friendly. But after 60, the story changes. Macadamia nuts are the highest fat tree nut, with roughly 3/4 of their calories coming from fat. Fat itself isn't the enemy. The issue is how aging bodies handle very high fat loads. As we age, the liver becomes less efficient at processing large amounts of dietary fat at once. This can lead to elevated triglycerides and unfavorable cholesterol patterns, even in people who otherwise eat well. Several long-term dietary observations in older adults have found that frequent intake of extremely high-fat foods can contribute to thicker arterial walls, reduced vascular flexibility, and increased metabolic strain. Macadamia nuts also contain a phosphorus load that may be challenging for aging kidneys. When excess phosphorus accumulates, it can contribute to vascular stiffness over time, something older arteries already struggle with. Let me share a real-world example. A 67-year-old man I'll call Robert enjoyed a small bowl of macadamia nuts every evening. He believed it was a healthy habit. Over time, routine blood work showed rising triglycerides and reduced exercise tolerance. Nothing dramatic, just gradual decline. When macadamia nuts were replaced with a more moderate fat alternative, his markers improved within weeks. He didn't change his entire diet, just that one habit. That's the key point. For most adults over 60, macadamia nuts are not toxic, but they're poorly matched to aging metabolism when eaten regularly. Better alternative? Almonds or walnuts, which provide beneficial fats in ratios that older bodies handle more easily. If you currently eat macadamia nuts often, a gradual reduction, not elimination overnight, is usually the smoothest approach. Now let's move to number 3, which surprises many people because it's often recommended for anti-aging. Brazil nuts are famous for one thing: selenium. And yes, selenium is essential. But here's the part that rarely gets explained clearly. Brazil nuts contain extremely concentrated selenium, and the margin between enough and too much becomes very narrow after 60. As kidney function naturally declines with age, excess selenium becomes harder to clear. Instead of passing through, it can accumulate. Early signs of excess often look harmless: brittle nails, hair thinning, metallic taste, mild neurological symptoms. Because these overlap with normal aging, they're often missed. Long-term dietary tracking has shown that frequent Brazil nut consumption can push selenium intake far beyond what older adults need, sometimes without realizing it. There's another issue that receives less attention. Brazil nuts naturally absorb heavy minerals from soil. In small amounts, this isn't dangerous. But in aging bodies, mineral accumulation places additional stress on cardiovascular and neurological systems. I once worked with a woman in her early 70s who began eating Brazil nuts daily after reading about their antioxidant benefits. Within months, she noticed tremors and worsening concentration. Once the nuts were removed and her diet stabilized, those symptoms gradually faded. Again, this doesn't mean Brazil nuts are bad. It means they are extremely concentrated, and after 60, more is rarely better. Safer selenium sources after 60 include sunflower seeds, eggs, fish, whole grains. These provide selenium in amounts the body can regulate more easily. Now let's move to number 2, which many people eat almost every day without a second thought. This one often surprises people, because peanuts are everywhere. Peanut butter, snack bars, heart-healthy labels, childhood habits that follow us into older age. But here's the first important detail. Peanuts are not tree nuts. They're legumes. And that difference matters more after 60 than most people realize. Peanuts are especially vulnerable to contamination by natural molds that can produce aflatoxin. Even small, repeated exposure becomes harder for the aging liver to process efficiently. When liver detox pathways slow down with age, these compounds don't clear as easily. They accumulate quietly. Another issue is inflammation. Peanuts are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-6 fats are not inherently bad, but balance is critical. After 60, many people already consume far more omega-6 than omega-3. That imbalance promotes chronic, low-grade inflammation, the kind that shows up as joint stiffness, slower recovery, cardiovascular strain, mental fatigue. There's also digestion. As stomach acid production declines with age, the dense proteins in peanuts become harder to break down. This often leads to bloating, discomfort, and reduced nutrient absorption, even if you've eaten peanuts your whole life. Some older adults also develop late-onset sensitivities. Not classic allergies, but immune reactions that show up as lingering inflammation, skin issues, fatigue, or worsening joint pain. One woman in her early 70s described years of unexplained stiffness and brain fog. Peanut butter had been part of her breakfast routine for decades. When peanuts were removed for a trial period and replaced with almond or sesame-based spreads, those symptoms gradually eased. Again, this isn't about fear. It's about recognizing that foods tolerated earlier in life may no longer serve you the same way. Better alternatives after 60? Almonds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, tahini. Now let's move to number 1, the nut that causes the most problems for older adults when eaten regularly. Cashews look harmless. They're soft, they're mildly sweet, and they're often included in healthy snack mixes. But after 60, cashews can quietly create multiple problems at once. First, oxalates. Cashews are among the highest oxalate nuts. Oxalates bind with calcium and can contribute to kidney stone formation, especially as kidney filtration slows with age. Even people who have never had kidney stones before can become more vulnerable later in life. Second, mineral interference. Cashews contain compounds that bind to important minerals like magnesium, zinc, iron. Over time, this can reduce absorption of nutrients that older adults already tend to be low in. That contributes to muscle weakness, immune decline, slower cognitive processing. Third, blood sugar impact. Compared to other nuts, cashews contain more carbohydrates and can raise blood glucose more quickly. For older adults with insulin resistance or prediabetes, which affects a large percentage of people over 60, this matters. There's also the issue of processing. Most cashews are heavily processed before they ever reach the shelf. They're often roasted in industrial oils or treated to improve shelf life. Those compounds may be tolerated by younger systems, but aging bodies are far less forgiving. A woman in her early 70s once described daily cashew snacking as her healthy alternative to chips. Over time, she noticed worsening joint pain and recurring kidney issues. When cashews were removed and replaced with walnuts, her inflammation markers improved noticeably within a few months. That's why cashews consistently show up as the most problematic nut for adults over 60 when eaten frequently. Safer replacements: walnuts, almonds, pecans. Now that we've covered the 4 nuts many older adults are better off limiting, it's time to flip the conversation. Because not all nuts are the problem. Some are powerful allies when used correctly. After everything we've discussed so far, this is where many people feel relief. Because not all nuts work against the aging body. Some actually support it in very specific ways. Pecans are one of those. They don't overwhelm the liver, they don't spike blood sugar, and they don't interfere with mineral absorption. Instead, they support systems that quietly weaken with age. Pecans are especially rich in polyphenols, natural compounds that help neutralize oxidative stress. Oxidative stress increases significantly after 60 and is closely linked to vascular stiffness, cognitive slowing, and chronic inflammation. What makes pecans stand out is their fat profile. They are dominated by monounsaturated fats, similar to those found in olive oil. These fats are processed efficiently by older livers and are associated with better cholesterol balance. Another overlooked benefit is blood sugar stability. Despite their rich taste, pecans have a very low glycemic impact. They slow digestion and help prevent the energy crashes that many older adults experience between meals. In long-term observational studies, older adults who regularly included pecans showed steadier cognitive performance, better lipid profiles, and lower markers of systemic inflammation. One man in his late 60s struggled with afternoon fatigue and unstable blood sugar, despite eating what he thought was a healthy diet. Adding a small portion of pecans mid-morning helped stabilize his energy without increasing glucose swings. How to use pecans after 60. Choose raw or dry roasted. Avoid added sugars or heavy salting. Limit portions to about 1 ounce per day. They work especially well as a snack between meals, or added to salads or cooked vegetables. Pecans support the brain, the heart, and metabolic balance, without overstressing aging systems. Now let's move to number 3, a nut that supports vision, circulation, and muscle maintenance in a way few others do. Pistachios are unique, not just nutritionally, but structurally. They contain compounds that directly support tissues most affected by aging. First, vision. Pistachios are one of the richest nut sources of lutein and zeaxanthin. These compounds accumulate in the retina and help protect against age-related vision decline. As we age, the eyes become more vulnerable to oxidative damage. Regular intake of these nutrients has been associated with slower progression of visual deterioration. Second, circulation. Pistachios contain arginine, an amino acid involved in nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide helps blood vessels relax and improves blood flow. For older adults, this supports vascular flexibility, healthier blood pressure patterns, improved oxygen delivery. Studies involving adults over 60 have shown improvements in endothelial function after regular pistachio consumption. Third, muscle support. Pistachios provide a rare combination of plant-based protein, fiber, and potassium. This supports muscle contraction, nerve signaling, and recovery, all of which decline with age. They're also naturally portion-controlled. Shelling pistachios slows eating and encourages mindful intake. That matters more than most people realize after 60. A woman in her early 70s who struggled with appetite regulation and mild weight gain found that switching to in-shell pistachios helped her feel satisfied without overeating. How to use pistachios safely. Choose unsalted or lightly salted. Eat them in shell when possible. Keep portions to about 1 ounce daily. They work well as an afternoon snack or added to yogurt or oatmeal. Pistachios support eyes, arteries, and muscles, 3 systems that walking alone cannot protect. If there is one nut that quietly supports multiple aging systems at once, it's the almond. Almonds don't work through hype, they work through consistency. First, the brain. Almonds are one of the richest natural sources of vitamin E in its most protective form. Vitamin E helps protect brain cells from oxidative damage, a process that accelerates after 60 and contributes to slower thinking and memory issues. Second, muscles and nerves. Almonds provide magnesium, a mineral many older adults are unknowingly low in. Magnesium supports muscle relaxation, nerve signaling, sleep quality, heart rhythm stability. Low magnesium often shows up as cramps, poor sleep, or fatigue, symptoms many people accept as just aging. Third, cardiovascular balance. Regular almond intake has been associated with improved cholesterol ratios, lowering LDL while supporting HDL. Unlike heavy fats that strain the liver, almonds deliver fats aging bodies handle well. There's also digestion. Almonds feed beneficial gut bacteria, which helps reduce inflammation and improve nutrient absorption, both critical after 60. One man in his mid-60s struggled with nighttime leg cramps and restless sleep for years. Adding a small portion of soaked almonds daily helped ease those symptoms within weeks. Best way to eat almonds after 60. Soak raw almonds overnight when possible. Eat about 20-25 almonds per day. Avoid sugar-coated or heavily roasted versions. Almonds are not dramatic, but they are reliable. They quietly support the systems that keep you steady and resilient. Now we come to number 1, the nut with the strongest evidence for protecting the aging brain, heart, and nervous system. This is the most important nut for anyone over 60, and the reason is simple. Walnuts provide something most older adults are critically low in: plant-based omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s help counter chronic inflammation, one of the main drivers of joint stiffness, vascular decline, and cognitive slowing with age. Walnuts are unique among nuts because they contain significant amounts of alpha-linolenic acid. This supports brain cell structure, blood vessel flexibility, communication between nerve cells. Research consistently shows that older adults who consume walnuts regularly perform better on memory and processing tests over time. Walnuts also support sleep. They contain natural compounds that support melatonin production, a hormone that declines sharply with age. Better sleep means better balance, sharper thinking, and improved recovery. There's also cardiovascular protection. Walnuts help reduce arterial stiffness and support healthier blood pressure patterns, without stressing aging kidneys or the liver. A woman in her late 70s who had begun struggling with word finding and organization added walnuts daily as part of a broader routine. Over time, her clarity improved and her confidence returned. No single food is magic, but walnuts consistently appear as one of the most protective foods for aging brains. How to use walnuts after 60. Eat 1 to 2 ounces daily. Choose raw or lightly toasted. Store them cold to protect the oils. Evening consumption may support sleep. Walnuts support the systems most likely to fail quietly with age, before you notice until something changes. Nuts are not automatically healthy or unhealthy. After 60, context matters. Some nuts overload aging systems. Others quietly protect them. The goal is not restriction, it's alignment. Remove what creates strain. Add what supports resilience. Small daily choices compound over time. And when chosen carefully, even something as simple as the right nuts can support clearer thinking, steadier movement, and greater independence. Which nut surprised you the most today? And which one are you going to change first? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read and reply thoughtfully. Thank you for staying with me to the end.